It's the Farmer to Farmer podcast, episode 96, and this is your host, Chris Blanchard. Diane Szukovathy raises about 4.5 acres of cut flowers at Jello Mold Farm in Mount Vernon, Washington. Now in their 11th year of selling flowers, Diane and Dennis Westphall have become cornerstones of the local flower movement in the Pacific Northwest. Diane co-founded the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market when she realized the need to expand her farm's reach without putting more hours into marketing and distribution. We discussed the establishment of the cooperative and its journey to self-sufficiency, including details about how the cooperative has brought on staff and set standards for its growers. Diane also digs into the details of producing cut flowers at Jello Mold Farm, where she and Dennis manage annual and perennial flowers and foliage crops. She shares her techniques and perspectives on weed control and pest control, and gets into the nitty-gritty details of how they produce top-quality cut flowers, including an excellent tutorial on cleaning buckets and totes. We also talk season extension in the high tunnel and forcing woody crops to flower in order to have products to sell in January. Talking to Diane about the bright colors of summer was just what I needed in these gray days of December. Hope you enjoy this episode just as much as I did. The Farmer to Farmer podcast is sponsored by Vermont Compost Company, founded by organic crop growing professionals committed to meeting the need for high quality compost and compost-based living soil mixes for certified organic plant production. VermontCompost.com. And by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are versatile, maneuverable in tight spaces, lightweight for less compaction, and easy to maintain and repair on the farm. Gear-driven and built to last for decades of dependable service. BCSAmerica.com. Diane Szukovathy, welcome to the Farmer to Farmer podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So could you set the stage for us at Jello Mold Farm, where you guys are located, what you do there, and how much of it you're doing?
So we're small-scale farmers. It's my husband and I, and Andy Kirkpatrick is our other worker. So the three of us are year-round working full-time on this. Basically, we have 7 acres of land, and we farm on approximately 4.5. And we're specialty cut flower farmers. So some of the things we grow are edible. We sell them to florists for decoration, and many of the things we grow are not edible. We're very diversified. We always just say we used to say we grew 150 crops, and now I think it's about 80, but nobody counts. We sell all very locally, so pretty much everything we grow sells into the Seattle market. And we're located in Mount Vernon, which is we're about an hour north of Seattle. And we're located in the river bottom farmland of the Skagit River Delta. So it's like kind of a famous area for tulip production. And tulips are about the one kind of flower we don't grow.
So in the Skagit Valley, I know you guys are right between the mountains and the ocean. If I'm standing on your farm and I look out, what will I see?
A whole lot of big flat farmland and some foothills along the side. We're at about 15 feet above sea level, and we're, probably a 10-minute drive from seeing salt water. So we're very close to where the river meets the Puget Sound.
And are you there in the Pacific Northwest surrounded by organic farmers, or is the Skagit Valley still a lot of conventional farm ground?
It's both. And we're kind of lucky right where we are. We're surrounded, our farm is a big rectangle that we're just right across the road from the Skagit River. So the dike is right across the road from our farm. And our piece of land is surrounded by organic production on 3 sides, which is a wonderful situation for us. Still a lot of conventional potato farming, especially, and the gold production in the fields here. Pretty heavy. There's a lot of berry farmers here in this area, and there are the organic farming we have going on is a combination of a few larger scale producers and then a lot of small scale farmers, small acreage farms as well.
So you guys have 4.5 acres. How long have you been farming there?
I suppose other people who have started a farm would relate to this. We didn't exactly instantly start a farm. We acquired land by mortgaging our souls to the bank in 2001. So, and we were fairly clear. Both of us wanted to be land stewards, so we were very clear that some way or another we wanted to try to make a living off a small piece of ground by intensively farming it. But we started out thinking we might be like farmers market food farmers. We weren't sure. And we had a landscaping business that, so we're commuting to the city to do sort of state gardening for it in some of those first years while we figured things out. And we used that occupation to, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but we did gardening to raise the money to start a farm. So I guess we're not people that take the easy path. Yeah, I would say that this is about our 11th year of actually selling product as cut flower farmers.
When you made that transition to becoming cut flower farmers, how did you do that? I mean, how did you go about getting started in the business, finding markets, and all of that?
So it was a pretty organic process. I mean, there's been the last few years a real upswing in especially cut flower farming. And I think it was quite a trend, and it's wonderful to see. Back 10 years ago, it was a fairly stagnant industry. We were already gardeners, and we're creative people. My husband and I both are kind of different kinds. I'm a visual artist, and he's a musician and a visual artist. And so we have a kind of a thinking process that is conducive to renovating anything or rethinking something. So what we didn't know at the time, I think, was a great benefit to us. I've always been a very kind of a, I remember plant Latin better than my best friend's names by no particular reason on my part. It's just how it works. So I have kind of a very comprehensive knowledge of plants that can grow in our region. And so then it became, what can we cut? What could go in a vase? And a lot of passionate and long-term research went in that way. So we ended up being kind of pioneers in the industry in some ways, introducing some plants that people really hadn't thought about using as cut flowers, and then also meeting, a wonderful group of established cut flower farmers and learning from them as well. So we always came into it with the benefit of not knowing too much.
And since the market's relatively new, did you guys have a hard time breaking into it with your locally grown, almost organic flowers?
It was insanely difficult. And if we knew more, we might have never started.
Well, and we're talking about Seattle here. I mean, I wouldn't think that, in some ways I can imagine new product, that seems like a hard sell, but it's Seattle, right? I mean, can you get more organic than that?
Yeah, that's a good point. We're definitely a good place to start something new. But the other side of that is the cut flower industry is its own niche within agriculture. And our industry got pummeled by the trade agreements that started happening. And I'm not saying it's all, I don't have a comment about the overview on trade agreements, but certainly the cost of labor is way cheaper in like Central America or South America, where most of the flowers are grown, South America. And so, it's like you're talking 1/20th the cost of labor. And so when all the tariffs went away and it became, kind of just, the stuff coming in on 7647s into Miami and distributing into all the grocery stores, it really took the bottom. Like you couldn't, like a lot of industries, like a lot of specialized cut flower industry kind of left, like carnation production went away and rose production really changed up. And so it became a situation where local growers used to have a lot more vibrant relationships with local wholesalers of flowers. And as the import trade increased, I think it went, and the statistics are going to be general here, but it went from about 70% domestic to about 30% domestic in a few decades. And that equated to a lot of businesses just disappeared. And we here in Seattle, we're just sort of situated where we got a kind of a double whammy because we have the general kind of climate of the industry that affected the whole country. And then just across the border in Canada is Canadian they support agriculture differently in their government there, and there's a lot of greenhouse production that's got fuel subsidies, and can't get all the statistics on it, but it's definitely supported industry, which flows across the border. The second largest flower auction in the world is actually up there, just outside of Vancouver. And so in the Seattle area, a ton of Canadian product flows in kind of freely into Seattle. And that made it kind of a desert of local producers. And I know that still is the farmers markets and all that sort of thing, but there's a lot of, there's among growers, and there's just a lot of different factors going on that are in some way or another subsidized or have a different economy to them than just trying to make a living off of a piece of land using kind of straight business practices. And so there's just a lot of barriers there. And so most people are like either very diversified and growing a little bit of flowers and some vegetables too, or and this is the history, or they might be doing just one very specialized kind of area, but it's really has not been a vibrant industry. And what's really helped change that and turn it around is the buy local movement that's happened nationally, where people are like, where do my flowers come from? And Deborah Prinzing with her work with releasing the 50-mile bouquet and then following up with slow flowers and really getting some kind of energy of the fact that flowers are on your table too, along with your food, and you ought to ask maybe where they came from if you're concerned about those sort of things. That has really helped us.
So on a national level, there's been some change that helped you. What did you guys do to break into the market?
Well, we started out, I call it like firing a shotgun, right, where you just try everything when you're getting going. It's not a bad way of learning. You're not paying tuition, so you might as well try this and that and the other thing. We did that with like, what can you grow? What can you grow on your piece of ground? What can you grow and then actually sell? So we started out, got a bucket truck together. I call it a bucket truck in our trade, where you're driving buckets of flowers around in water and shopping at various florist shops and selling out of your truck. And we started doing that, back in 2008, 2008. And we got into some of the local farmers markets, but neither one of those two kind of avenues was what I would call a living, and we did not. We needed to make a living off of our farm. We couldn't afford to subsidize it by kind of having an outside job. We didn't have that kind of option. We were continuing to landscape, but we were trying to make this farm actually, it was basically kind of a creative experiment. Can you actually do this? And we do this kind of based on some of Wendell Berry's philosophy of kind of agronomy and economy, the idea that if you want to take care of a piece of land, you need to be able to stay on it with economy. So what we ended up doing was getting together with some other flower farmers in our region and starting a cooperative, and that has been a game changer.
So tell us about that cooperative and the process of getting it started.
Well, it's kind of like starting a farm. Like if we knew what we were going to do, we probably wouldn't have done it. It was basically I had gotten onto the board. I was serving on the board of the National Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, which if anybody listening out there is like kind of a newer farmer thinking about how to kind of get going, doing that kind of service could be really useful. You make connections and you can kind of learn a lot about how to grow things from people who've been doing it longer, certainly in the specialized industry. So I was in charge of having regional meetings, and when you're in charge and you're doing all the work, you get to sometimes have some influence in setting an agenda here and there. So I said, well, let's see here. We'll have a couple speakers, but let's have one of these. What I love the roundtable discussion. That's a good way to get in trouble. So I said, okay, well, let's see, farmers. What do you need? What's working for you? What is it? Let's hear about it. And that conversation was so immediately went to because there was a pretty vibrant growers market, cooperative growers market in the Portland area, and nothing like that in Seattle, and there never had been. And what happened is with all the kind of overseas market share takeover, the local growers were less valued. They've been the ones who have been working for a long time and selling to wholesalers were finding themselves that the wholesalers were buying less and less, and they weren't as concerned about whether or not they bothered to shop with the local farmers. And so they're like, the more established farmers were like, hey, this is pretty grim, and the new growers are like, well, we don't know how to break into this market, and so the word like, how can we crack Seattle, I believe was the terminology I remember around that. And they were like, well, what if we had a market kind of like Portland? Well, okay. Well, we happen to have, and now this theory that, farmers are, that now we call it ADD or ADHD, but it's really just, don't give us riddle and give us land. I mean, people don't sit around. Farmers don't sit around, right? If you have an idea, you better take it to execute. You better execute that idea, right? Because nobody's going to do it for you. So we just had a few real go-getters in the group. I'm certainly to put myself in that category. And So we had that discussion in June of 2010, and we were incorporated as a cooperative in February of 2011. And there were 12 of us to start with. We identified ourselves as being from 4 states, although it's really mainly been in Washington, Oregon, kind of group. We've had some growers from Alaska who will grow peonies, but it's kind of a minor component over the years. And we basically started out with a tiny bit of money that, someone had a grant that they let us kind of do a little piece of in exchange for collecting some tuition off a class that we held. And we got our paperwork together, and we opened our, signed a lease on a piece of, on a space in Seattle. It was 2010 or 2011, so it was still the aftermath of the 2008 economic bubble burst. So there was space available in South Seattle, down by where the other wholesalers were, and we basically just chopped up and leased that space up to our membership, and so that they could each sell kind of like an indoor farmers market. We built a space in there and basically grassroots, got ourselves going, and launched ourselves on a journey that has been pretty rewarding and epic and hardworking, and everything that I think is, when I talk to now in retrospect, we now have the money to pay consultants to help our co-op grow, and they say, "Oh, your process is perfectly normal for the formation of a co-op." I'm like, "Okay, that's good to know." So yeah, we're in year 6 right now. A couple of us farmers, I did the first one, and then another grower did another one. We wrote for USDA grant funding. I wrote a multi-state grant that was funded through Washington, Oregon Department of Agriculture, special compound grant, that is. And then another one of our members wrote for a value-added producer grant. And that was something like $208,000 we got funded over a period of about 2 years. And then this past year, in 2016, we had no grant funding at all, and we have managed to be self-sufficient, and we're now run by staff. None of that happened as quickly or easily, I should add. I think we're on our 4th manager, and this one's awesome, and hopefully is with us for many, many decades, because she's doing a fantastic job, and we've had 100% growth of our gross revenue in the last 2 years. So we're benefiting from the trend for buy local floral, but also nailing our game by top quality and having a really wonderful creative customer base in Seattle. So it's a good business model.
So with that business model, then, is the wholesale growers market buying the flowers from the farmers, or are the farmers setting up? You said they're setting up individual booths in the space, and customers are coming to them. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, it started out being individual booths, and each grower did their own transactions. And, of course, from the perspective of the customer, they're having to write like 5 checks, or, like everyone's got to have their own credit card taking abilities and all of that. So when we hired staff, we also went through a transition where we changed up to where farmers don't lease stall space anymore, and overhead, all the membership consigns their product to the market, and the market takes 30% for operational costs. So in that way, we simplified things. We're able to pay for our overhead. That's how we've been able to be self-sustaining, because we have we're working on our operating budget for next year, and it looks like it's right around $400,000. So that'll raise that from somewhere. So the formula works. The more volume you run through the co-op, the more efficient it is, and but the more overhead cost it is too. So kind of those finding that. It's like a process, of growing and kind of achieving a kind of level of stability in the core there. I should say that market, it was kind of an act of courage for us on the board. I've been the chair of the board since the beginning. It was very much an act of courage for us who had been selling directly to our customers to give that over to staff and to take that hit, that 30% hit. And I did actually do a chart that kind of shows the way that our farm's income was affected by the development of the co-op. And it's very interesting because we were selling, a little under $60,000 gross off of our farm in 2010. That was the year before the co-op started. And we had a very big increase in sales that in 2011, just by having exposure to so many more customers. We were much more, rather than having to drive our truck around, was already, you could see that the model made a lot of sense. even when we were kind of still Wild West and each doing our own thing. And then you get to 2012, 2013, and it starts to table off. We have kind of strong growth. And then it starts to table off. And what it is all that energy you're spending, each person's doing their own marketing, and you're doing you're having to do so much energy to get that product sold to your customer. And we're talking about the customers in the market are mainly wholesale, the retail florists. So it's a wholesale transaction, but on a kind of small business to small business level. And it's a really good fit, I think, naturally for like our size of farm. But what happened was when we went to selling through the co-op, we took a tiny hit that year, but really what happened is our sales went crazy up, almost enough to absorb that 30%. And then it's been uphill since then. So what's interesting about that is that we had to have some vision to understand and get the right people hired and, kind of there's some luck involved, I suppose, in all of that. But what we knew is we couldn't stay where we were and we couldn't grow more without taking that co-op to another level and having it run by professional staff.
As a co-op, how did you guys make the transition to being run by a professional staff? Because that's a hard thing to do. It's hard enough as one farm to hire people and do a good job of that. And now putting people under a board and trying to satisfy the needs of all of your different members. How did that process work?
Not in any kind of linear fashion. Well, I think that value-added producer grant we got was $200,000. And we decided as a board, and our board was always really good. It's not a huge board. You're talking about, we started out with 12 members, and we've kind of gone up and down we've been up to 14 and back down to 12, and I think we're at 13 right now, and we're about ready to add somewhere between 3 and 5 members probably next year and kind of build our membership from here because we've got the kind of base in place to be able to organize and crop coordinate and be able to make that happen in a way that is beneficial to everyone. But in there, the board has always been very lean and functional. We have 7 members on the board. 5 are elected farmer owners. So 5 of the 12, however many members we have, are on the board and are farmers. And then 2 are board-appointed industry reps. So that would be florists, people who understand the industry from another perspective to advise us. And they're all voting positions. And we pretty much, although we have in our paperwork that we're a majority vote, that's how we run, it's consensus. We listen to each other, talk things out, and find a solution that works. And we're all kind of similar-sized farms, so we have similar needs. And those things tend to make sense when you look at them. When we got that grant, we decided that we had to hire a manager. And that's a standard thing. Most co-ops have a manager, so it was a natural growth step. But until that point, I was the de facto appointed CEO, which was, I'm not trained in that, and it was getting pretty stressful trying to run a farm and handle the politics. And, it was just a lot of threads to hold on to. And I had a mantra for myself that was just keep the baby alive. Keep the baby alive. It has a potential. It has the potential to grow later in well-trained hands if I can just keep it from dying first before we can get there. So when we decided to hire, the first hire we did hire an HR person to help us, but that's a very tough thing. You're right. The criteria, we wrote a job description and we put out a call for applicants, and the first person we hired was, I would say, a learning experience for all of us. And I would just say that we did not end up hiring a person who was a good fit. We got an HR director the first time out, and that's pretty normal, I think. There's a lot of criteria. We're sort of in a cooperative is a not-for-profit cooperative corporation, is I think how they describe it in our articles in the state of Washington, or articles of incorporation. But basically, we're kind of like a nonprofit in many ways, and so you have the need to be able to serve the manager. The manager needs to be able to listen to and work with and serve the board, and also help to grow this basic business and out in the regular business world. And that combination is not an easy fit to find. And someone who understands agriculture and the culture of farmers and the specifics. And I will say this, that floral is definitely its own specific niche within agriculture. Very, very creative. Our customers are very visually oriented. And so all of those things kind of need to come together. And the first manager we hired really had more of a kind of a top-down, old school management style, I would say. I mean, that's just my words for it. That ended up not fitting our culture very well, and then not really kind of helping us move forward. So that lasted about 6 months, and that person resigned. And then we hired a person who was radically overqualified in some ways as an interim manager. A community member came forward and worked for us on a kind of in a stopgap measure. That person was a lawyer and had been had, among other things in his past, been the deputy mayor of the city of Seattle. So definitely knew how to run budget, and really helped us out. Built us some phenomenal dashboard, like that financial dashboard. Like keep saying, will take us to another galaxy. Like we're not going to outgrow our ability to analyze our numbers and our number of customers purchasing each week, and kind of charts and graphs to kind of check out, watch our growth, and kind of make kind of decisions before we have a problem and all of that stuff. So it helped us very much, and it also helped because he worked with our staff that we had. We had some great people, and one person in particular who had applied originally for the management job, and we had recognized that she was a gem, but she didn't really have the profit and loss experience that was needed to run a business like ours. And what happened was she ended up kind of getting herself an MBA, an informal version of an MBA from this person who stepped in as interim manager. And so that person is now our manager, and kind of had all the qualities we wanted but didn't have the training, and then got it with us and then stepped into the management position. And that ended up being a fantastic fit. And she has a very egalitarian management style. She's very lowbrow, and it works very well within our group because I kind of look at it, I have kind of in my mind that sort of a pyramid versus a round table in terms of different models of running a business. And a business like ours, which is already a cooperative, really works best when certain people aren't more important than other people. There's good, strong communication within the group, and people have roles that they play. But like, for instance, me as chair of the board, I'm not more important than other board members. I have some knowledge in my head and a particular skill set which I bring to the table, and ideally have people fit into their positions in ways that, like, if you're a person who's more social, might be in charge of the membership committee, or it's kind of can identify within ourselves our strengths and weaknesses and try and plug those in. But those are like everybody's strengths are working for the good of the group, as opposed to having certain important people who sit at the top, we got at the top and have titles. It's a different mentality, and it's just been really conducive to, I think, the mentality of people who are in small-scale agriculture. We're not trying to take over the world, but we want to work together to hold and have a solid position within a world that's more and more corporatized. So it's working, and it feels very, very functional.
And are the other growers in the cooperative, are they similar in size to you, or are they a range of scales?
I would say that we're all small-scale agriculture. And it's an interesting question because, people, I would say we range from half an acre to maybe 20 acres. Dollar-wise, different people are farming at different levels of intensity. I think that our farmers have all been experiencing growth within their businesses, the ones that are engaged in working with the co-op. So it's a moving target. And I think we did a really thorough survey of our membership. And I think they were averaging $40,000 to $60,000 a year in sales through the co-op, I think. And I'd like to see that bump up. I think there's a number that makes you a living. We'd like to see the average for our membership go up. And I think we'll work toward that as a target goal. One of the things that we've identified is that getting our growers more kind of business management training and record keeping and that sort of thing will help our growers to be more efficient and to make more money off their work. So it's kind of we can share resources like that. It's all voluntary. I mean, we've never forced anything on someone, but making kind of different opportunities and resources available to our growers is important to the co-op. It helps keep the pipeline full, and it keeps our industry in a more positive zone.
You talked about how much cheaper it is to grow flowers in places that aren't the United States. So how much cheaper? is it? I mean, when you guys are looking at your cost for producing flowers versus, say, somebody doing flowers in Mexico, how much difference is there?
Well, it's funny because right now there's that whole kind of the news story about, is it Carrier?
Yeah, that Trump convinced to stay in Indiana. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's the true story, whatever. But anyway, I heard a commentator talking about how, well, here $15 an hour is the cost of the labor, and in Mexico it's $10 a day. I would use that measure. I think that would be probably conservative. I imagine that farm workers might get paid less than factory workers, and I would imagine that the economy is similar in Colombia. I know that I heard a number that was like $1.56 an hour some years back, and I think that might have been kind of a number someone was bragging about as being a good number. And we really don't. The thing is, it all happens under a cloak of not knowing. There's no transparency there. So it's kind of an interesting thing where we want really high standards of living for the people that we can see. It's just a complex equation on a global scale. And certainly when you're talking about small scale agriculture and being able to sell, within 60 miles of your farm, so I kind of feel like there should be a way of doing that, and it should be a fairly that working hard outside and gambling with Mother Nature ought to be enough obstacles.
I think that a lot of my listeners would agree with that. I'd certainly agree with that. But at the same time, when you're looking at a 1 to 10 cost ratio difference, I mean, that's how are you overcoming that from a marketing perspective?
Well, you cannot crack that straight up. That's too great, and it is. And labor is your biggest cost of business. It always is. And any farmer who's listening out there, I sure hope you're costing your own labor into your equations. That's the biggest mistake our small scale farmers make. Is like, oh, I'll just work harder and I'll make it work. So what we've done is it's funny because we picked the hardest, most challenging thing we could possibly do, and mainly we're making it work because not all flowers can ship. So, for instance, like you have to be able to put it in a box dry to get it out of, Colombia and get it flown in. It's going to have to be able to sit dry in a box for a few days usually. So that's only certain crops that you can do that. And then you have to be able to grow it in equatorial conditions, which is all year round. Roses, the imported flowers are the ones that lend themselves as well to that. Roses, carnations, chrysanthemums. I mean, that's what you see in the grocery stores. And so we're looking at it. We're going, okay, in Seattle and also amongst all across this country are these creative people. It's like you realize, well, and this is an interesting thing to think about too, is that women buy most flowers. They buy them for their friends. There's this peaks that go on at Valentine's Day and Mother's Day. But it is mostly women who buy flowers for women. It's like, well, those flowers are kind of boring. There are just a few kinds and they're the same all year round, and there's a lot of creative people who might want to see things on a more seasonal level, more like kind of a garden in a vase concept. And that's really been a lot of what that you can't put dahlias in a dry box and ship them, so we grow a lot of dahlias. So a lot of the things we grow and sell at the market off of our farm, but also off the other farms going into the co-op are like, we call them our key crops or commodity crops in this certain way, but they're no way commodity in the way that you see in the grocery store. They're just things that are available at certain times of the year, and it's a lot of pretty good parallels to cooking seasonally, and it's really inspired creative energy, and that's a lot of what drives our business.
So you guys are competing on the selection front. Are you guys also competing on a quality front?
Yes, quality. We just set a very, very high standard for quality right out the gate. I led that effort, and Molly has taken it. Molly Sadowski is our market manager, and she's all about quality. And not just me, but some of our core growers, the people in the very heart of our organization have been. We recognize that because we're selling a highly perishable product, most of it's in water and shipped in water, and our customers they need that product to be reliable. And a lot of our customers are pretty high end, like their wedding budget. Their budgets for the wedding flowers might be, $20,000 just for the flowers. That might be a kind of a medium scale wedding. And that's, those kind of, working with those kind of dollar amounts, they're dealing with people who have high expectations. And so we have to be able to deliver what we promise, and it has to be reliable, and it has to be high quality. And we recognize that we surveyed forests right out the gate, and we continually hear stories about this, that is everyone's biggest nightmare, is like to go pick up your order and you didn't come in, or you weren't informed, or it came in and it looks like crap. And they deal with a lot of stress around delivering something that's top quality, that's highly perishable. So we have built a solid business around really caring about our customers and being very careful to deliver what we promise and to deliver top quality products. And, it's been a little bit challenging because, how do you communicate that, to other growers? I mean, we wrote it kind of I don't remember it off the top of my mind, but we put right in our bylaws, kind of like, we kind of identified the things that would not be tolerated on the market floor as, like insect issues, or, we had a whole list of things, drooping foliage or whatever. We've spelled it out kind of. But having a manager who's neutral and maintaining that standard for it is so important, to just see that it can solve a lot of issues if you've got one place where everyone comes, where it's not being run by a farmer. And that's been, I would say, absolutely critical to the survival and growth of that business.
And it sounds like that was something you started with. That wasn't something that you came up with after having some problems. That was something that was there when the cooperative began.
Yes, I would say so. And then we all agreed upon it too. And we agreed upon those standards. I think that, actually our farmers they're really smart, and they're really the ones that we started with, and this is still true. Actually, we're working on getting a new generation in there. We're recognizing, okay, most of our farmers have been farming, at least 10 years, and, a lot of us are getting a little bit older, but we also know our game pretty well. And so it's not been that hard to communicate that, but we've done a lot of teaching to the new people that we've brought in about, what is a bunch and what's standard and what's to be expected, and, buckets should be clean, and make sure there's a lot of nuance. And what's great is the co-op can communicate that, and there's someone to answer the questions and help to get things standardized.
Talk to me about quality in flowers. You mentioned, no insect issues, no drooping foliage. I mean, when you say no insect issues, that's a pretty hard thing to accomplish with certified organic practices. I wouldn't say no insect issues. I mean, insect infestation, I think was the word we used. But okay.
It's not like there's no insects in the market. In fact, it's still a little bad for some of those critters. A lot of them are beneficials, and they end up down there in the city, and you're like, oh, honey, go find an island somewhere. And I would say also that our farmers. I mean, that original grant that I got as all assessments for the salmon safe program. Do you know about that one? It's a third-party certification for sustainable growing practices.
I only know about it because I read about it on your website. So maybe you tell us a little bit about that.
So, in cut flowers, certified organic is a pretty high standard to meet. And sometimes you can talk to different growers. Some people do it. But basically, it's been my experience that the customers aren't looking for it in the same way that they're looking for that assurance in food. So when you're a small-scale farmer looking to where to put your time and money, it may or may not make sense to do that. All the kind of steps that is required to be certified organic. But we always recognize that growing practices mattered. I mean, certainly I've always had a high standard about taking care of the land. That's why we started farming to begin with, and why we continue to farm. And so, you can say, well, okay, well, how do you farm? Well, I farm responsibly. Well, that's the first party certification, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of, actually it can have some cred when you actually know who the farmer that you're buying from personally. Personal relationships, that's a lot. You can have trust there. But we identified that it would be valuable for us to have a third party, kind of certifying our farms. And so there is a program called Salmon Safe that's available in Washington and Oregon. I think they go up into British Columbia a little bit. And they do, I think they were doing golf courses for a while, maybe rain gardens. They do all kinds of, they're pretty creative that way in terms of being integrated into urban DHs as well. But they have a trained staff that they work with who visit farms and certify them for a list of sustainability issues. And they look at quite a bit more than certified organic does. They'll look at your water usage and your erosion controls, and like sort of more of the your pollinator habitat, for instance, that sort of thing, which we always score very high on that one. But anyway, so they'll do a whole comprehensive farm walkthrough. It's like education based, and they've been very wonderful to work with. And we got our farm this at the original Southern Crop Block grant paid for those certifications, and then most of the farmers have chosen to re-up, and they go every 3 years, and at a cost of about $600 a farm. And it's a much less involved process in that it's a once every 3 years check-in rather than a kind of an auditing process like in the certified organic that gives us that that assurance that it gives our customers an assurance that we care about sustainability issues, and that has been a successful program for our farmers because the bar has been high to meet as a group.
So that's not just something that Jello Mold Farm's doing. That's something that the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market is doing.
Yeah, the individual farms within the market. Not every single farm is certified. And that's one thing I would say is, starting this co-op, we have been about coming together and finding our similarities rather than making rules or kind of squeezing people out if they're a little bit different. So because we need each other to survive, and that's been it's kind of guidelines rather than rules. It's been it's voluntary programs. That's been our way, and it's been I think farmers are a stubborn lot, and I certainly don't like anybody telling me what to do. So I kind of think about that like other farmers don't like that either. So there's an opportunity to decide if you want to do it. Well, I think of our original farms, I think we had a session to 12 and 11 were certified. And one's an older guy that's Dutch and he likes his chemicals, and we're not going to change him. And he has a beautiful product, and our market's more beautiful for having his products in there. And that's just kind of how we are. We're not really militant about those things.
So what else goes into quality and cut flowers? Or at least I should say maybe what else is important in quality and cut flowers when it comes to the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market?
Okay, that's a very specific question. So with cut flowers, stage of harvest is very, very important. So you have to know your crop. Because some flowers will continue to open after they're harvested, some will look just like when you harvested them and no more. And so that stage of harvest is very important. It's critically important. It's a mistake that a lot of beginners make in harvesting things when they're more in the bloom stage that you think they're pretty in, but they're actually not going to travel right and get to what are they going to look like when they get to the end user is the question. It's different for each crop. And then there's it's a quality issue in terms of stem length. You just need to know what's the standard cut length that's expected for a bunch of something. We have a lot of creative crops in the market, and there are things that flow in there with, we have a grower growing pansies, and those are 6-inch stems, and that's fine, and everybody knows what to expect there. But, there's the crops like dahlias and things. Well, that's a 16-inch cut is a pretty standard cut on a dahlia, and that kind of knowledge within crops. And then there's, you don't want to see visible insect damage. Little imperfections can be fine, but sometimes little imperfections can make something more beautiful. But we don't want to see something crawling with bugs. And there's a shelf life on flowers. You don't want to leave it out for sale longer than it's going to deliver some level of quality to the customer. So our staff takes care of a lot of that kind of shrinking product if it gets too old on the floor. And I should also point out that the market isn't just cut flowers. There's a lot of different kinds of specialty foliages, and that's an area that we've really gained a great niche in terms of, it used to be Salal and asparagus fern and a couple of choices, and that was kind of what it was in the floral. Now we're growing things like dusty miller and raspberry foliage and a gazillion kinds of fall foliages, all of them tested. And then each product has kind of a different, call it post-harvest solution. So some things that can go just fine in plain water, other things benefit from a hydrating solution or a little bit of sugar solution, holding solution. So we know that about the crops, so that we deliver them in clean buckets in the right kind of solution to give them a good base life. And that's, again, very good crops.
Awesome. So we're going to stop there, take a break, get a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. I want to talk with you more about your farm rather than just the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market.
Sounds good.
Perennial support for the Farmer to Farmer podcast is provided by Vermont Compost Company, makers of Fort B and Fort Light potting mixes for organic growers since 1992. Founder and owner Carl Hammer got started as an organic vegetable grower, where he learned that quality transplants really mattered and that quality transplants come from quality potting soils. Makes sense. Just like the donkey on their logo, Vermont Compost Company's potting soils aren't glitzy or glamorous. They're steadfast and consistent, stubbornly making certain that your transplants can get everything they need from a few cubic centimeters of soil. And even though it's not all about saving money, Vermont Compost's fall pre-buy program can help you get what your plants need at the best price and the best shipping options. With their full truckloads and shared truckloads program, they organize shipping to other regions in ways that sometimes gets prices down to the level you'd pay right there in the great state of Vermont. Plus, you pay a lower price for the potting soil. To get a quote from Vermont Compost, go to the ordering page on their website, submit the request a quote form. This form also adds you to their mailing list so you stay in the loop on the program. And remember, the donkeys that I mentioned earlier are the real thing. And you get a little bit of donkey manure in every patch of Vermont Compost potting soil. Feed your plants the best. VermontCompost.com. Bandwidth for the show is provided by BCS America. A BCS two-wheel tractor is the only power equipment a market gardener will need, with PTO-driven attachments like the rototiller, flail mower, power harrow, rotary plow, snow thrower, log splitter, and more. You name it, and you can probably run it with a versatile BCS two-wheel tractor. The first time I used a rototiller way back in 1991, it was mounted to a BCS two-wheel tractor, and it spoiled me for life. When you get behind a BCS, you can tell that it's built to the same commercial standards as four-wheel farm tractors. I've used other tillers and mowers, and I spent most of the time when I was using those thinking of how much easier it would be with a BCS. On my own farm, we went through a number of so-called solutions before we finally got smart and bought a BCS. Even though we owned a four-wheel tractor to manage our 20 acres of vegetables, the BCS tackled jobs that we couldn't do with the larger machine, from mowing steep slopes and around trees to working in our high tunnels. Check out bcsamerica.com to see the full lineup of tractors and attachments. All right, and we're back with Diane Szukovathy from Jello Mold Farms out in, I think that's actually just Jello Mold Farm, not Farms, out in Mount Vernon, Washington. Diane, before we took our break, we talked a lot about the co-op. So I want to turn to talk a little bit more about your farm and actually how you're doing your production on your operation. You said that you're managing 80 different crops?
Yeah, don't make me count it, but that's how many line items I've got in QuickBooks, so I think so. and by the way, it is, one farm is enough, thank you. Jello Mold Farm. One is plenty.
One's enough. You're not looking for another one these days?
Pretty much, yeah.
So what's the season like out in the Skagit Valley? Are you guys planting and harvesting all year round, or is it a more focused towards the summer and the fall?
We have about a 9-month growing season. We have 6 months intensive and then shoulder seasons on either end of that. We're always working to expand those shoulder seasons. So I think just now we took our last batch to the market a couple of days ago to the co-op, and we won't bring flowers in now again until probably about the third week of January, or crops. We'll start in with forced cut branches or plum branches and kind of build on that. But in our climate, it just gets so, even if we have a mild winter, because our winters can vary quite a bit depending on how the Gulf Stream is running and what kind of year it is. But even so, it gets there's no daylight. So that nothing really grows for that period of time from, right about, it gets pretty dark starting about the end of October and doesn't really come back around until, February. Things will start to grow then. We do use hoop houses, unheated hoop houses, so we, especially for spring crops, we can bring quite a lot of, quite a jump on the season that way. So the first, we start with hellebores. Our first big crops are hellebores, and they'll come in March or April, depending on the year. And then we'll kind of transition into Icelandic poppies and sweet peas in our hoop houses. And then, about toward the end of May, we are harvesting peonies out of the field, and then we have a number of perennial crops as well, and then we move into dahlias in the high season. The demand for a product is, we have in this area, it's a big destination wedding location in the summertime through all the San Juan Islands and all around our area, all the waterways in our very lovely sort of 80-degree sunny summers. We end up selling a lot of our products. So in the months of, especially August and September. July, August, and September are our main sales months.
You said you guys have high tunnels. How many do you have?
We have 4, and we're putting up our 5th right now. I was just going to say that every time we put up one more, we say that's our last one.
High tunnels are kind of like that. They tend to propagate. Are you just doing standard high tunnels, ground to ground, or are you doing anything special with those because of the non-heavy winter environment that you're in?
I don't actually understand the relativity of that question fully, but I would say that we have a lot of winds here, so we do have to anchor posts and a little more work to put them up. But basically, we do like a 20 by, they're basically 20 by 100 foot footprint. And we were doing 8 foot tall, but actually we realized at a certain point that our sweet pea vines get 10 feet tall. And so we started the last few we've also been 10 feet tall so that we can not lose the end of that crop when it's pushing up against the ceiling.
Roll up sides for ventilation, kind of standard practices like that.
Yeah, very standard. We have a lot of north-south winds right in our piece of ground, so we have them oriented that way so we can leave them open and get good cross ventilation. And a lot of the benefit for us is actually keeping the rains off in the late spring and into June. We have sometimes we get into a rainy period then, and it's actually quite mild, but some of the flowers don't hold up well if they've gotten wet.
And tell us a little bit about how your farm is laid out. With 4.5 acres of ground you guys are kind of in that weird cusp, right? You're not small enough to be doing kind of the JM40A style with the BCS tractor and a bunch of 100-foot beds all laid out perfectly. But you're also not quite big enough to really do a lot of, tractors and 1,000-foot rows. So how are you guys managing your crops?
Well, it's interesting. Philosophically, we started out as pea patchers in the city, and I think in some ways we still use some of that. There's a lot to be said for intensive management of ground, So we have one small Kubota tractor. We're a bit limited because the front wheels are 2 feet apart, like that's the clearance space. So a lot of our rows are 2 feet wide, and we have very, very heavy weed pressure here because the ground's wet in that mild time of year for so long that we use it very responsibly, as responsibly as we can, but we use a lot of ground cloth in the aisles to keep the weeds down, and we grow, we have a lot of perennial and woody crops, and we're moving all the time more into more woody crops, so those are long cycle crops, so like lilac, and they're my favorites actually. I've always loved trees and shrubs. So we're diversified in that kind of way, and our rows are, the piece of ground is shaped, it's a big rectangle, but there's a swale that runs through it that before they built the dike on the Skagit River. We're on the outside bend of the river, so our soil's a little bit sandy, and so we have the swale that was carved in by the river, over eons, that makes our ground not be one big old square out there. So we farm, our beds are shaped around where that swale runs. And we have good road access, and we'll have, like our dahlia beds will be between 100 and 150 feet long with side aisles so you can walk around and get them picked on both sides. And we usually just take we have a pickup with a canopy, and we'll just drive it out there and put 16 buckets in there and fill them up and take them to the cooler at the barn. And we're scaled. Our barn, we have a cooler with a cool bot in it and a prep room, and everything is, and then we have a box truck that will take 7 floral carts on it, which is, between $5,000 and $7,000 with the product. And we'll run that truck 3 days a week during the high season, mostly full, but we also bring the product on Wednesdays with a full truck, and then the Monday, Friday trucks will bring product from the other farms in our area down to the co-op too. So we're always sharing resources where we can. But we would have to make a lot of changes if we were to scale up much from here in our high season. So what we've been doing strategically is working on filling out the shoulder seasons more when that truck's not running full, when our kind of infrastructure isn't completely used in the barn, so that we're just maximizing efficiency. I know I have a brain that happens to work that way, and I think a lot of farmers do. If you get down to it and just make yourself do that work, it's funny how you can go, we could just suck it up 5 times. What if we paved this area right here and got a truck with a lift gate? We could handle the bucket once. Things like that really pay off.
Well, it is kind of funny how focused you get on efficiency when you're the one lifting up the 5-gallon buckets full of water.
Yes, and when you're getting older, too. That helps.
That does help. Yeah, I wish somebody told me when I was young that I should pay more attention to that. because I was going to get older a lot sooner than I thought I was.
Yeah, kind of like a conveyor belt, right?
One of the things that you talked about was, as an important quality element, was getting stems that are the right length. Are there things that you do out in the field to ensure that you're getting the right length stems?
Yeah, and especially because we have 3 of us who've worked on this farm for 10 years, and that's great. So we've got a core crew that knows, we've got our labor, and people know their areas, what they do really well. So, like, if you've been harvesting a crop long enough, you can look at it, walk up to it, close your eyes and get it at the right length and never think about it. But it's really hard. You realize how hard that is to explain when you get someone new. And we do hire seasonal labor to cover kind of our peak times. And, we also take in interns, and, it can be so hard to say, okay, well, it's this long. So, this long, if you hold your fingers in the air apart from each other, really can shift quite a lot with the brain and the passage of a day. And, it can be quite shocking to walk up and, I left you for half an hour. Oops. And so really, like, body parts make really good marker points. And I'm sure every kind of farming has these kind of things where you can go, okay, well, like, I know that, everybody's body's a little bit different, but you just get out a measuring stick and go, okay, well, 18 inches is right here on my arm, where my sleeve meets my, forearm or whatever. And then that becomes, it's something that the person can use as a measure until they have familiarized themselves. I know Dennis uses it. He gets a lot of our woody crops, and he has a measure that he uses that's like basically to his armpit on a lot of those floral crops. So that kind of thing can be really useful. And yes, it matters a lot.
Are there growing techniques that you use to make sure that you get nice, long, straight stems?
Oh, absolutely. And it's, again, this stuff all varies from crop to crop. So, for instance, like, we grow a lot of foliage crops and woody foliage crops. And with those, we go through, and we'll just go through our woody rows, the crops that we want to treat that way sometime during the winter or early spring. We just get, the version of the weed whacker. We don't even own this tool. We go down and do consumer rentals and rent it for the day. But we have the weed whacker that gets the saw blade on the end of it. And we just go through and just cut all of our stuff down, because to basically to like 6 inches above the ground, all the like 9 barks and the raspberry, the raspberry crops that do the fall cropping, we'll cut them all the way down and just grow them like a hay crop. And for cutting, so we want all those nice, even, straight stems that basically suckers is what we're producing on a lot of our foliage crops, for example. And even in the case of a lot of the flower crops, you'll pinch them so they side branch and do a number of shoots. And then we have a whole system of using side rails and staking and netting, so that varies from crop to crop, so that we get straight stems. Although, then again, it's like, the florist wants a viney look and everything. So, it's on it goes.
As soon as you figure out how to get them nice and straight, that's when they want them to be crooked, so they look homegrown, right?
Or not even homegrown, elegant and draping and fashionable. These are very sophisticated customers, yes.
Right. That's the difference between me and a floral designer, right? I go homegrown, they go drapey and fashionable.
Right, exactly.
So now out in the field for weed control in those perennial crops, what are you doing?
Well, we do a fair amount of mulching, although then we have our armies of slugs we have to deal with. It's our own particular area of growing, but
and slugs in the Pacific Northwest, because I grew up in Seattle, they're not like slugs here in the Midwest.
No. Although we don't have like Japanese beetles and things. I mean, I'm not complaining. I want to make it really clear I'm not complaining. I'm really careful with groups of farmers, like nationwide groups of farmers, like, okay, I'll keep my mouth shut because maybe the crop didn't grow, but we have pretty easy weather and pretty easy insect pressure compared to a lot of parts of the country. Still have our challenges, and like I said, achieving photosynthesis is one of them. In some growing years. But the slugs are, they're huge and they're epic. I mean, their biomass out on our farm has got to be by the tonnage. And there's certain times of the year when they don't matter, but right when the soil temps and things warm up so that where they hatch and start eating, there's a point there where you can lose your crop overnight if you're not careful. So we use, we keep a half a rack of stale bush light out in cans out in the hut, out in the field, we call slug treats. So we do pick them into deer because they'll crawl out of water. And so we do a little bit of that hand picking stuff. And then we also use Sluggo, and we just have to keep on it. So the mulching makes that worse because they have places to hide. But the other side of that is you have kind of freedom from weed pressure. So basically, we try and keep our rows clean so the weeds aren't seeding in there. When it gets too ridiculous, like in a perennial, herbaceous perennial crop, like phlox or globe thistle, that kind of thing, that we'll just dig up another part and restart the bed in another part of the farm, fill it up and turn it over to woodies, sort of lazy permaculture style.
Right. So with the woodies, you're not as concerned about the weed growth.
Exactly, because they'll shade it out. It depends on the crop, but so many times, we have a lot of horsetails and I figured they were here a long time before we got here, and we're just supposed to go down 11 feet. We're in sandy soil along the river. I'm not going to fight that battle. So we just if you till an area, then the horsetails aren't too bad for a few years, and you can keep them pulled and whatnot, and then just transition your crop along to something that's strong enough that the horsetail just acts as a ground cover and doesn't really bother the crop. So it kind of lends itself to growing. Like lilac is a great example. That lilac has no problem growing and shading out and keeping thin undergrowth of perennial weeds. I'm not concerned about what the farm looks like as long as we're able to grow healthy crops and take good-looking product to market. So there's an awful lot of tolerance of things that aren't really harming the crop. It's all tidy out there.
For your annual crops, what are you doing for weed control?
Well, we till, so that helps a lot in that. And then we don't do any direct seeding, and that's unusual. With a combination, we use a lot of drip irrigation, and we have that sandy soil. So even though we have, fairly a lot of water in our aquifer right underneath the farm, it's not necessarily, we can't necessarily have even moisture on the surface without doing some kind of overhead watering. So instead, what we'll do is soil block pretty much all of our crops, and that helps a lot. And for instance, we grow a lot of amaranth. We grow about 10 varieties of amaranth, and that's one that is basically a weed itself. I mean, it's a cousin of pigweed. And so what we'll do to kind of work with that is we'll soil block. But we don't actually soil block them. We broadcast the seed into full flat because you can basically bare root the seedlings. So we just take a sugar shaker, plant the seed, and then separate it out, fill the ground, and prep it clean. And then what happens is your starts are maybe a few inches tall. They've got to jump over the weeds that are going to sprout in that same bed. And then we go through once and scumble it just to give them that so that they can just get a head start, and then they're growing, and they'll shade out everything from there. And it works very well. And it's just don't try and grow something else besides amaranth in that area, because quite a healthy weed seed bed we've got out there.
And the way you've got your farm laid out, you mentioned that in a lot of the perennial crops, you have fairly wide roadways for getting in and being able to do the harvest. Are most of your paths pretty wide? You mentioned narrow beds where you got the tractors.
It depends on the crop. We kind of have it broken up into small fields. So we'll have maybe 10, 15 rows in a chunk, and then a road that goes on either side so we can get access through and get to the ends of rows easily. Those are on side aisles. This is hard to explain without looking at a map. So we have good access, and we can move around on the farm. But we also have to be careful here because we're quite fungal here in the Pacific Northwest. So we don't want to pack things in too tightly because you can get issues with mildews and these kind of different fungal issues. So we want the airflow to be able to go through as well. A lot of our aisles are about 3 feet wide. That seems to be a standard. Sometimes what we'll do is make wider aisles and just do a double row. It very much depends on the crop.
And you talked about using hand picking and Sluggo for the slugs. What other pest challenges do you have with the flower production there in the Skagit Valley?
Well, I kind of think we're like the doctor office here because it's so cultural in this valley, and trips are just murder. I think that, like some of the other farmers in the valley, grow big fields and will use ryegrass as a cover crop or a rotation crop. And so you'll get these migrations of insects. I think that's not uncommon. Anybody that's growing in farming areas will get those kind of like, ooh, overnight the temperature went up 5 degrees and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay. So like in our dahlia crops, we have drip pressure, quite a bit of lygus, starting to get cucumber beetle. So those are all kind of insects that will suck they'll either chew on the flower parts or suck the plant juice out of the flower parts and make them look kind of not sellable. And we will work with that. I try to, very carefully, I might do a couple of smell-set sprays this season, but I'm really hesitant to use that product, and I'm careful about it because I don't want to kill bees and I don't want to build up resistance to it in the field. So a lot of what we'll do is if we have insects that are of a tolerable level in terms of being able to produce a quality flower, but then we don't, like, it's a sort of thing where you don't want any bugs crawling on something that's going to be like put next to white satin in a wedding.
Right.
Kind of a high, a lot of times, like, we have a really nice collection of, because we're so careful about our, what we put on the farm, we have a wonderful collection of beneficials. But of course, like, your Aureus bugs or, the Ephus rips are much more visible and annoying to a bride potentially than the thrips would be. So, like, okay, how do we deal with this? So what we've come up with is we do of course you have to know your crops, but dahlias, you can get a dahlia flower wet, and as long as you don't keep it wet for too long, it won't won't harm the quality of the flower. So we will actually dip bunches of our white dahlia. We dip all of our white dahlias in a pyganic solution in our prep room. So we're able to use we don't build up a resistance in the field, but we're able to use a really effective blanket insect killer to make the product be perfect.
That's a really interesting approach. I like that.
No, all the time. I mean, I think I really do believe that small-scale farmers especially, maybe all kinds of farmers, but especially small-scale farmers, I mean, we're so in touch with, the land makes a living for us. We need to treat it well. I think most small-scale farmers I've met are, pretty careful and pretty thoughtful about their processes.
Any other great tips for doing pest control and cut flowers?
Oh, I think walk away when it, like, get out the weed whacker. I think it's like give up at a certain point. Like, a lot of times, like, for instance, because these insect pressures will come through, and like a lot of times they come through in waves, right? Like, for instance, I don't want to keep bringing up dahlias, but you'll get a rash of aphids, and you think, oh my goodness, those are pretty bad. They don't watch them, and sometimes I just I've learned by not having enough time to deal with everything that sometimes problems will solve themselves if you give them a little bit of time. So, for instance, your beneficials will follow the problem, and so kind of trying to trust in the balances and being willing to sacrifice a certain amount to learn, if that's possible. Sometimes you have to go, well, I'm going to wait and watch this. That kind of thing I found to be of great benefit. And also, if it's too hard to grow, don't grow it. That's what we just move on to the crop that wants to grow in our, like, okay, we got a problem here. Well, what does it cost to fix it? A lot of times, like, for instance, a spray, whether it's an organic spray or not, it still takes time out of your schedule. And if you're a diversified small-scale farm, you don't have a lot of extra labor during some of those times of year when the insects are deciding to, visit you. And so maybe it's like, well, okay, somebody else maybe has a piece of ground that can grow this better on. And that's part of the benefit of the co-op, too. Not just harping on the co-op, but really we've been able to streamline what we grow and then just grow the things that want to grow on our ground that fit in our systems that we do well. And that's been really helpful.
So when it gets to harvest, you mentioned that you guys have a truck that's got a shade canopy on it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have the kind of heat that a lot of people have, like in the Midwest and the Northeast, Northwest, in the Southeast and Northeast. And so, a lot of times the temps don't really go over about 80 degrees here. Sometimes we'll get a heat wave. It might get to be 90 a little bit, but it's very uncommon. So we do want to get stuff out of the field, and even at 80 degrees, you want to get it in the cooler fairly rapidly. So you want to make multiple trips to get your product into the cooler and get it cooled off. About 16 buckets, if 3 of us are harvesting, we can bring 3-4 batches in easily in a day. And so that kind of keeps it from sitting out too long in the heat. And you don't want it in the sun, and you don't want it in the wind. So a lot of pressure to get that product into the cooler as soon as possible, which makes it so that you don't, I wouldn't want a bigger harvesting vehicle, put it that way.
And are you bunching things out in the field?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it depends on the crop. Almost everything gets bunched in the field. We we'll have a count, and that'll be a standard count, and you just cut it and bunch it. And we have little twisty ties with our farm names, and that's part of our kind of trademark, and we'll keep those in an apron and bunch them. Now, there's some other things that we'll we'll attend to in the prep room. Like, for instance, the co-op has a program where we sell volume product to grocery. And there's certain crops like dahlias, sweet peas, Icelandic poppies, where if we know that we're picking that crop specifically for a grocery order, we don't put our twisty tie on it. We actually have a co-op tag that's an elastic tag. We'll do that kind of thing in the prep room, or packing out those kind of special order buckets.
And are you guys making bouquets, or does everything go to the market as a straight bunch since you're selling it all to the co-op?
For our farm, we do not make bouquets. Some of the other farms in the co-op do make them, and so as an individual item that they'll offer and maybe sell through the grocery. This farm, I used to make bouquets for farmers market. I'm way too creative. I can never discipline myself. It's like 2 minutes ago, like that. It's just like, okay, don't try this.
Too much of the artist.
Everyone's got to be new. Yeah, everyone's got to be new and special. That does not get you the efficiency you need.
That's funny. You'd think of an artist being a benefit on a flower farm, but I guess that is a way that it's not necessarily the best thing to bring to bear.
Well, let's put it this way. It makes it really good for talking to customers and understanding their viewpoints. And we can get these, and that's one of the things that's quite wonderful. We still maintain that advantage of direct marketing because we still take our product down and we're still present on the market floor selling our product, especially during busy days. We're not required, but it's welcome. And the customers know the farmers. And so we get to know, like, when they say peach, we know what that means. Like that one says burgundy and it means dark red. That one says burgundy and it means dark wine purple. And, like, you get to where you kind of can interpret their way of looking at the world of color very specifically. That's a great, being trained in kind of visually and artistically trained is helpful for that. And also being able to direct market, it gives us a huge advantage over the kind of the much more impersonal as the other wholesalers.
I know from talking to other flower growers that they place a real emphasis on having clean buckets.
Oh, yeah. You're speaking my language there. Oh, yeah. Food grade clean. That's my mantra. Food grade
clean. What does that mean?
Basically, would you eat out of it? I mean, I don't use bleach. We actually put a hot water heater out in the prep room so that we have a bucket washing station that has one of those restaurant dishwasher sprayers. And we'll use phosphate-free dish soap lightly, and then just hot water, and we'll scrub out if there's visible, kind of scum or dirt, and we'll scrub that off, and then, we can do that pretty fast. And that, we look at it and we say, okay, if I'd eat out of it, I'd put flowers in it.
So that restaurant-style sprayer, that's the one that kind of got the flexible thing that comes up from the sink, goes up above your head, and then comes back down, and it's sort of springy and bouncy so that it holds itself, right?
Yeah, it cost $330 when we didn't have it to spend, but I'm kind of a geek for gadgets, and I just went, I know we're going to want that. And it was a great investment. And
then are you using a scrub brush or a sponge in addition to that?
We don't use, the terry cloth rags. Whoever depends who's washing the buckets out there. But a lot of what the florist gave us this trick is actually the round, I'm talking new from the store, not used, but the round kind of toilet brush. This actually gets in the corners of floral buckets really well. So it's a pretty handy little, I like that particular, they call it a wand in the trade.
Huh. Toilet brush. That's great. And
but not the there's different shapes of toilet brushes. The one that's cylindrical.
Right. Yeah. Not the one that's designed to get up under the rim, but the one that's kind of designed to get down in the trap.
Exactly.
See, I do clean the bathroom sometimes, so I know about these things. Okay. And of course, if you're doing something like that on a vegetable farm, please make sure that you have that brush marked as for food grade use only and make that really clear. Just, I have to put that in as a food safety thing. So that's a really great tip. But you said for the corners of the flower buckets, I always think of buckets as being round.
Oh, actually some of our favorite buckets are called perconas. And they're actually kind of Dutch invented. By the way, the Dutch have done so many innovations in the cut flower trade. It's their mainstream, one of their main industries in that country. And they are just beautiful systems and innovations people. So there's a whole kind of line of buckets under the name Percona. If you were to Google it, it's Procona. And there are certain standard sizes available in the trade. They're kind of rectangular and they stack together in a beautiful way. And a lot of them will take exactly 10 of a certain kind of bunch really well. And those buckets are kind of a staple in our industry, and they fit. What's beautiful about them is that they don't tip over when you're driving in a truck with them or if they're on a rack. and they fit together in a very kind of tight way that uses space well. So yeah. And even in the round buckets, like we also use, like especially for a lot of the woody cut branches, we use the kind of standard 5-gallon buckets. And those ones, it's that corner, it's where the sidewalls meet the bottom inside the bucket. That rim, that edge right there can get kind of stummed up in that place to kind of get into.
And how do you train people to wash buckets quickly? I know that on my farm, watching our harvest totes was one of the slowest, most painful things for me to watch as the person who also was writing the checks for payroll.
I hear you. So we have our prep room set up. We built that to start with. So we've got counter space, and we have a really beautiful old double laundry sink, like one of those old ceramic ones we got at the salvage yard, and it's all kind of built in, so it looks like a kind of a rough style kitchen in our prep room. And with that plumbing, we've got it where you could just put a stack of buckets on the floor. You've got the big double sinks. You fill one of the buckets with water and you scrub it around, and you can get a real rhythm going. And there's a full big drain rack, so it's just like boom, 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 boom. And I encourage playing music; that helps. And I do it myself too. And it's just, I guess it's because we set up the flow right in our facility. It seems to not be a problem. And
of course, the drain rack being important, because if you stack stuff up wet and you've got a microfilm of water in there, that's just going to encourage any bacteria that you do have left over to start growing. Right. Just put them on there upside down. And basically, in the high season, we're turning around and filling them back up as fast as we can get them washed, pretty much. So there's really not an issue there. But yeah, it is nice to have that. Yeah, that space has been lovely. I mean, that was something we built our barn ourselves, and we thought about those spaces, and that careful thought that we put into it all those years ago has really been a kindness to. We gave a kindness to ourselves by taking that time and care and investing not that much money, but just a little bit of money to build it, think it out and build it correctly. One thing that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to circle back to was this idea of doing forced cuts in your greenhouse. Can you talk a little bit more about what kinds of crops you're forcing and how that process works? Well, if I understand your question right, we're talking about bringing crops sooner inside an unheated hoop house than they would come out in the field. And so basically, I mean, it's different in everybody's climate, but the theories can be adapted anywhere. Basically, for instance, like right now, we have a little seed starting greenhouse. And that's the only place we use a little bit of heat. And it's about 10 by 25 foot space. And that's where we have our heat mats for seed starting. And we also have, we actually dug out and put in a kind of radiant floor heat in there. So we did it informally, but we do the PEX tubing, and we put a little 10-gallon RV water heater. Would love someday to make that solar. That would actually be probably a pretty fun project to figure out. Right now, we just run it on electrical. And we circulate water through there, and it keeps that house at between 50 and 60 degrees on most days that we have here. When it's down in the 30s and 40s, it'll be 50s and 60s in that house. And so what we have right now is it's early December, and we have a whole house full of sweet pea and Icelandic poppy seedlings. And they're getting ready. They're growing on. We're started from seed, and they're growing on, and they'll get planted out in January. Into the unheated hoops. And I'll watch the weather very carefully, because sometimes we get a little Arctic weather comes down, and you can kind of watch it. And by the time you can look and see to the end of January, it's usually okay. And so we'll get them planted out into the unheated hoop houses and beds during that time. And then we can start bringing crops off of both, cutting off of both of those crops by about mid-April. And then that season will carry on through until the end of June for both of those crops. And so if we were to put those out in the field, we couldn't even the weather wouldn't allow us to put them out in the field until probably March or April, and then we wouldn't be bringing crops until June. And then sun comes, and those are both crops that like cool weather. Sun will come and fry them by midsummer anyway. So it allows us to have something to sell in volume with a quality crop in that kind of April, May, June period of time. And you had mentioned that you're going to be having stuff to sell again to the co-op here in mid or late January, I think.
Yeah, that would be there's a lot of spring blooming woody branches that are really wonderful crops. I mean, lilac is, of course, going to be one of the most well-known ones. But we'll start with the Asian plum trees. We have a whole row of them. We're planted way close together that we can keep coppice and wouldn't work those. So I'll pull like hundreds of bunches out of there of blooming buds. And if you start to cut them, in our climate anyway, if you start to cut them by about the third week of January, you can force them in water in a warm room and they'll come open. So we sell those through like late February and through March. And then we also have Hellebore orientalis, which are a wonderful early season crop that likes our climate. And then we'll move into some of the other, like the spireas, and there's a whole duceas, wedulas, there's a whole bunch of those. They're basically garden plants, and they have different base lives than we just know to tell our customers, because many things, if they have a 3 or 4 day base life, the way we're growing, we can get them to market, keep that cold chain going, and the customer can buy it and use it for an event, and that works out really well.
So with that, Diane, it's time for us to turn to our lightning round. So I'd like to start with, what's your favorite tool on the farm?
I think it's the soil blocker. And I think it's because, we're Jello Mold Farm, and I think that subliminal molding tendency is already in my blood. But I just happen to love the way that, especially the 2-inch block, we figured out a way to use it really quickly in flats, get a flat up of 50. So we got a nice even number for doing our seeding. And what I love about it the most is on a farm like ours, we have limited labor, and, stuff happens and the weather throws you for a curve or whatever. And the way that the soil blocks work, the roots don't circle like in a plug tray. They root through naturally by air at the edge of the block. And so you can get away with a couple extra weeks of time in there before you get a crop in the ground without stunting it.
Are you guys mixing your own soil, or are you buying that in for the soil blocks?
We enhance. We buy a basic mix. It's peat-based, and I don't love that. It's the only reason why I love growing more and more perennial and woody crops, because we're not in that cycle. But we do buy in a peat-based mix that's got this pH balance, and we add our own organic nutrients and compost to that, and that's what we use.
You mentioned that you guys had to learn a lot of growing crops yourself, figuring out how to do the production on your own. What resources do you turn to when you're starting that process of bringing a new crop into kind of commercial status at Jello Mold Farm?
We'll start by go online and see what I can find out Googling. And I have some books that I happen to love that are, really for especially cut crops. And I'll talk to other growers. And if it's something that we haven't seen grown already, I'll just start trialing it and then take it from there.
Any books in particular that you recommend, or particular websites that are especially important to you?
Yeah, there's a book called Woody Cut Stems for Growers and Florists. It may be out of print, but I think they're going to bring it back in again. It's by Lane Greer and John M. Dole. It's a Bible for me. I just absolutely love that book. It's got full of great technical information. There's another one called Specialty Cut Flowers by Armitage and Lauschman. That's really good. Both of those resources are available through the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. And they have a lot of great resources especially when you're starting out as a grower. They've been very helpful.
Where did your farm name come from, Jello Mold Farm?
Basically, I lived in a building with a bunch of other artists in Seattle, and the part of town we lived in was getting gentrified because, Seattle's a boom and bust town, and you, having grown up there, know that. And so at a certain point in this building that we lived in was in Belltown, this is about 5 blocks north of the Pike Place Market. And it's in the early 90s, and our building was kind of tawdry, and they were putting up all these sort of condos, and property owners to another property owner says, hey, that place is looking a little shabby, and we basically had a deal where we got cheap rent for occupying the space, so they were ready to do something with the building, with the land, and so they said, you guys have to paint the building. I'm like, okay. So we sit down and realize we're going to argue all day about what color we want to paint it. So 2 people just went off and picked the colors, came back, it was purple and lime green. So fluorescent purple and lime green. We're like, okay, right, that's never going to fly. But the real estate guy said, okay, painted it purple and lime green. I didn't think they never did. Anyway, so painted this building purple and lime green, and we lived, I lived downstairs in one of the storefronts. And I'm like, this place is starting to look fancy, but I don't think we're done yet. So I just started putting a bunch of Jello molds on the outside of it to make it even fancier. And there was a kind of the grunge scene in Seattle, and there's a building, there's a restaurant in the building where all the rock stars were hanging out, and had a little donation box for Jello molds, and to go to thrift stores. They put 500 of them up on the building. They did a really nice job of it, made them up real pretty, and like embroidery kind of, and it turned into a landmark, and that tour bus could come by and see it, and kind of realize, I could stop making all this big messy political art and make a difference and catching people in a different, kind of a more playful way, and it changed my trajectory. So went from there to starting my gardening business. I just named it Jello Mold Landscape, and it took off from there, and met Dennis somewhere along the way, and when we went to start the farm, I said, Dennis, what should we call it? And he goes, I think Jello Mold is a pretty good name, so okay, good, let's get name with that. So that's how it happened.
It's certainly catchy. I like it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely memorable. I mean, that's something, and there's not a lot of other names like it, so that's worth it.
And Diane, finally, if you could go back in time and tell your beginning farmer self one thing, what would it be?
I thought, because I knew you probably knew that question, I thought I wouldn't tell myself a darn thing, because if I knew how hard that path was going to be, I probably never would have gotten going on it, and yet it has been so rewarding, and we have found our way. So I think in a way, not knowing too much and then just being dedicated and diligent to learning is a pretty great way to dive into it. I think a lot of times if you know too much, you just won't try things. And sometimes the best solutions come out of the unknown place.
I love it. Thank you so much, Diane, for being on the show today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate how professional you are, and you're very easy to talk with. Well, thank you.
All right. So wrapping things up here, I'll say again that this is episode 96 of the Farmer to Farmer podcast, and you can find the notes for this show at farmertofarmerpodcast.com by looking on the episodes page or just searching for Jello, Jello. Transcripts for this episode are brought to you by Earth Tools, offering the most complete selection of walk-behind farming equipment and high-quality garden tools in North America, earthtools.com. And by Growing for Market. Get 20% off your subscription with the code PODCAST at checkout. You can get the show notes for every Farmer to Farmer podcast right in your email inbox by signing up for my newsletter at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. I'd also encourage you to head on over to iTunes and leave us a review if you enjoy the show, or talk to us in the show notes, or share our episodes on Facebook. We're at Purple Pitchfork on Facebook. You can support the show by going to farmertofarmerpodcast.com/donate. I'm working to make the best farming podcast in the world, and you can help. Thank you. Finally, please let me know who you would like to hear from on the show through the suggestions form at farmertofarmerpodcast.com. I'll do my best to get them on the show. Thank you for listening. Be safe out there and keep the tractor running.